I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Diane Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it? All right, so let's just continue this conversation because I think that we were like getting to a place where we can really deep dive into how it is that white identified humans can interrogate whiteness and like what that actual process feels like. And you were just about to communicate some thoughts to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in different iterations of these kinds of groups during the course of my awakening, which has been really the last 8 to 9 years of my life. So they've looked a little different. The one that I'm in now, working on the book White Women, Everything You Already Know About Your Racism and How to Do Better, is probably the most raw and the most dedicated, I guess, maybe, or a really deeper dive to this work. So as I've gone through my awakening, maybe that's just the universe's way of taking care of me to keep me going, is that I've been in groups that if I were to be in some of those earlier groups now, I'd probably be like, oh my gosh, you guys are so problematic. And so, as people awaken, you can see it more. I can see it more. I can hear it through my own language now better than I used to be, and I can hear it through other people's language better now than I used to. So each group that I've been in has been at a different level. And I know that there are some folks that were working on this book in our interrogating whiteness groups that I know, because I heard from people who were in those groups and who subsequently left, decided to stop working on this book because they thought one of the authors was too mean. And which is classic whiteness, right? It's classic white women.
But do you resonate with any of the places where they would have thought it was too mean? Like, what is one of those harsh, it's too mean moments? Like, what is something in the book that was like, oh, that felt mean? Or that somebody would think it felt mean. You might not.
I don't know.
Tell me, open the book and tell me one thing that could be received as mean, but is just the truth. And it's like something that you have to grapple through. And I know I'm putting you on the spot, like you didn't.
Yeah, I know. I wish
at all in any way, shape, or form.
I've got lots of places, like highlighted, which maybe
could give an example.
Yeah,
so like when somebody,
I just opened to a page, and one of the things that I highlighted that obviously meant that it resonated with me was white supremacy means that you, white people, are raised to see yourselves as the default. In your white cocoon, you see your white experience as the default lived experience. Now, when I first read that, I didn't agree with it. If I'll be honest, there were quite a few things in this book that I didn't agree with the first time I read it.
Can I stop you and if you could go back to that place of the first time that you read it, what did you receive from the words? Do you know, like, that you didn't agree with? Because it's a statement about default existence.
Right.
So what did...
Yeah, I think the default was probably the thing that I had the harder time with, that I hadn't really unpacked that fully at that point. Not fully. I've not done any of this fully, but so I think it was the default part. It was the idea that there was a white cocoon, and I felt it in my gut. There were several places in this book where I felt it in my gut. And the response, the gut response, wanted me to run away from it. I wanted me to say, well, that's just, she's just being, whatever. She's just feeling some sort of way because she doesn't like white women. And I had those gut reactions when I first read it. And I'm not even sure that I heard, I can be more clear about that now than I could then. So I'm not even sure that I told myself that at the moment, because I think that's what in my experience, unpacking this indoctrination, that's how it kind of lands on me, is that I have these experiences. It's not until later that I can look back on them and really go, what was I the most upset about? And what was I really reacting to? Because in the moment, I don't feel it. In the, oh, well, I feel it, but I don't
But you're
cognitively.
not making the connection. You're
Mm-mm,
not
I'm
taking
not
the time to say, what is this feeling? What the reflective moment, because
right.
you
Because I
really
didn't know
had
how
to,
to do that.
because whiteness lives in the default.
Right. So, right. The default is why I didn't know how to reflect, but I didn't know that. So, right. So
Yeah.
now I know that. So now I'm like, okay, when something like that happens, when I feel that punch in my gut, I'm like, okay, that's something I got to pay attention to. It's something I need to listen to.
Mm,
But the first time I read this, and even before, obviously before it, I wouldn't have even known how to make that self-reflection. So,
mm.
but like I said, I've read this book almost 4 times now. So it takes that many times, and I'll probably read it more because there will always be something that will come up that'll be like, eh, you know,
And I want to deep dive into like the first thing that might have caused you to take a back is a default into whiteness.
yeah,
How do you understand if you can remember back to that period of time, how did you understand what a default into whiteness meant? Like, how did you understand that? Or why would you say, no, that can't be true? They just don't like white women, is what I heard you say. And
yeah.
I wouldn't have done the way that you communicated the thought process of experiencing those words. I'm trying to understand how you did that logical thought process because I wouldn't have at all. And so that's what I'm trying to understand.
It's hard for me to say clearly, only
Yeah,
because it was, several years ago, and so
yeah.
I'm so different now. It's hard for me to remember how blocked my filter was at the time, but I think I, at the time, if I remember correctly, I probably was still pretty bought into that whole white women struggle under the patriarchy, so therefore we are a marginalized group hoo-ha that
Mhm.
I don't believe in anymore. And
But do you not believe in that now? Because we're seeing that white women are impacted by the patriarchy in
yeah,
this
I know
time
we're
because they're rolling back all the legislative advances.
and I get that, and I know that we're impacted, but we're not victimized like
No,
I don't.
you're pedestaled.
Yeah, I don't see it as I don't see I'm reading They Were Her Property kind of blew that up for me, but it talks about how white women, mostly white women, owned a lot of the enslaved, that the landowners would put the
Mm,
enslaved in their wives' names,
mm,
for various reasons. But it breaks down that stereotype of how white women are so put upon by the patriarchy, and we're so victimized, and we're so, yes, it does impact us. I'm not saying it doesn't, but that whole, oh, poor pitiful us, and we had to work so hard to get the vote, when I had no clue that black women weren't allowed to vote when we got the right to vote.
yeah,
That was
man.
totally not on my radar until just a few years ago.
Mm,
So that whole victimization stuff is the thing that I know I was still bought into that. So the whole default thing, probably, can if I can go back to that moment, probably had to do with me still thinking that we were victimized by patriarchy. So therefore there is no
mm.
default. If you were going to say there was a default, it's for white men. It's not us. Um,
Okay.
we still have to fight for everything that we get, which is total bullshit. We are on a
Mhm.
pedestal. We are the ones that benefited the most from affirmative action. We were the ones that benefit from all of the privilege. And that to me feeds into the default, which I was not aware of when I first read this book, that whole concept of how our society is built for whiteness comfort, but most especially for our comfort. That's why our white tears work so well. They wouldn't
Mhm.
work so well if the society wasn't built for our comfort, because the moment we get uncomfortable and the white tears meter starts to do this, the whole world
Mhm.
quakes. Oh shit, what's going to happen? The white woman is upset. So much so they call us
Mhm.
Karens. There's a word,
Mhm.
a name,
Mhm.
because it's a thing. And
Yeah.
so I don't know if that answered your question, but that's my
No,
best.
yeah, because it does speak to hearing and receiving words as me. as mean or as uncomfortable
Hmm.
is really not is not really being able to identify like what they're speaking to because you just don't have any perspective of it,
Right.
right? So how do I give an example outside of whiteness? Because it would really be great not to always center whiteness in that way. But I can't think of it in that moment, but maybe in parenting, right? That's a universal thing that occurs
Mhm.
in parenting, and a parent is like, no, you can't be out after dark, or the case may be, right? Is that mean? No, it is. It might be mean to whomever is getting the instruction that they can't be out after dark,
Mhm.
but the actual not being out after dark is about your safety
Right.
more than anything else. And you
Right.
don't know that until you get older and understand, like, or have some expanded experience of in the darkness, there's danger. And so, yeah, in this moment, this just brings me back to in this moment, as you're talking about, white womening and white tears and white comfort and who is holding the power within like these hierarchical white supremacist structures that really do default back to white males and do have this like really impactful gender distinction that we exist under. That's real. It's real. It's just different layers of it because hierarchies give us layers and different measures of experience under the hierarchy. When we were starting this electoral process, and I always go back to this because this was a shock moment for me, and the response to the Republican response to the State of the Union address, and this white woman was like, "We hold the DNA," like all of the narratives that were going to Black women magic. This person was saying, "Hey, we actually hold the strong DNA, and let's take our power back, and let us feed into our white males, their supremacy and their right positionality in our humanity. And like that's what we need to do. We need to take the reins back and do that again. And here now we find ourselves in a kind of new neo-Confederacy where we are going back to those times where we're experiencing like super domination, oppression, and all of all the negative things that cause us to exist in the way that we're existing in this chaos right now. White women do hold a very strong position in creating that. So when you have to reflect on your behaviors and you're receiving that as something that's harmful to you, it's really hard to create balance out of that, right? The internal struggle that you deal with as you're sitting in this interrogating whiteness, if you can't really dive into what the meaning of the words are and be gentle with yourself as you're hearing it because it's not like you've done it. It's the systems that
Hmm.
we've created
Right.
uh, position you in this very pedestal. Like how do you want to take yourself off of this pedestal when that is the structure with which you exist under and it's a place of comfort? Like
Yeah.
how do you really do that? Like as you're sitting in these interrogating whiteness things, how are you really doing that?
Well, I can only speak for my own experience. I think authenticity has always been a really pivotal thing for me. I grew up in a traumatic household and where
Mm,
we were expected to experience this trauma and then the next day act like nothing happened.
mm,
Just that lack of accountability and uh, my first husband used to call me the accuracy police because I was so focused on things being accurate. I was one of those annoying people that would stop
okay.
in mid-story because he'd get it wrong and
Uh,
I want to tell it right.
right.
It's a trauma response for me. It's a compulsion for me for things to be right. And
Mm,
in that need for accuracy and authenticity, when I realized in my awakening that I wasn't being authentic, I thought I was being authentic. I thought I was a good person. I thought I cared about other people. I thought I was a person that stood for social justice. And then I was like, holy shit, I hadn't done any of my own unpacking. I hadn't done any of that. I had not knocked myself off the pedestal and I needed to. I needed to get knocked off and I needed to knock myself off. I needed to jump off of it. And so
Yeah.
when I realized that, for me, it's like my Dr. Maya Angelou says, once you see it, you can't unsee it. I can't unsee it anymore. So it becomes a compulsion
Got
to
you.
me. The same compulsion that I had for authenticity and accuracy, I now have for knocking myself off the pedestal. And I'm not I don't want anyone listening to this thinking that I think I've got this all figured out. I do not. And there are times where I still need to get knocked off the pedestal. And I have beautiful friends in my life, like you, including you, and others who will
Knock you
say,
up on any pedestals.
you know, I believe you need to jump off that ledge right now. Including my partner, who is a black man, who, I just the other day said, please jump down. And so but that's important to me. I have seeked out people to be in my world that will say time to jump off the pedestal, and or let's jump off together, depending on how they identify.
Hmm.
And what I struggle with is that I've got other people in my life, including my family, who don't want to come anywhere close to the edge of that pedestal. They're not, and
Yeah.
maybe they would eventually, but they're not there yet. They have not, it has not become more important to them to unpack their own indoctrination than it is to stay comfortable. And
Hmm.
so I just keep nudging them
Yeah.
because I can't
Being
not do
present.
it. So yeah.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing that we, in this moment, especially like within the global community, that we want to keep on doing, right? Is we want to keep on nudging, keep on being present, keep on being curious with each other, and then creating these opportunities to have conversations. I do think that it's really important to have conversations with white folks among white folks, but the accountability partnership is important because you don't want to get into a place, and this is not just white folks and white folks, it's like when people are talking to each other, have some measure of accountability, because when we don't, it looks like what we're seeing in our leadership of the United States right now, right? There's
Right.
a whole lot of stuff happening, and we're trying to figure out what accountability is going to look like, and that's really being difficult because the systems that were created, our three branches of government, are not working in the way that they were initially established, right? So we see what that type of chaos can lead to. I hear you. I see you in the motion of saying something.
Well, yeah, it just occurred, a light bulb just went on over my head that, for in our last episode we talked about now the DEI has been greatly dismantled in a lot of areas. What can we do? What can be done?
Criminalized.
And sorry,
It's been criminalized. DEI has
criminal.
been
Yes,
criminalized. Yeah.
yes.
Hmm.
And it just occurs to me that this is something that white people can do. If the official spaces of DEI are no longer allowed to be present in organizations and in groupings and in places, all across the board, schools, places of worship, all of those things. If white people want to know what we can be doing to counterbalance that, we can be doing just what you and I are talking about right now, which is doing our own unpacking and learning how to do those nudges and not being afraid to do those nudges, because I get it gets I walk into a room and people's eyes start rolling. If they're all identified as white, they're just waiting for me to call somebody in for something. And I'm not complaining, not saying that I'm poor. Don't feel sorry for me, but it can get exhausting and it can feel like I'm the person, I'm the one that's going to be bringing that in. And people will separate themselves from you. They won't reach out as much. They won't want to call
Yeah.
up and just shoot the shit with you because they're afraid they're going to say something wrong. All of those things are true. And
Yeah.
we will still be in community with people. And so I'm continuously trying to learn how to do that whole I'm curious doesn't work for me. When I say it, I hear you. And it sounds so inauthentic coming out of my mouth but you and I talked about this, how you having an I'm curious moment with a white person is different than me having that
Hmm.
same moment with a white person, because I'm just like, oh, get over yourself. And so
Yeah. And
Um,
then that white person might also be like, you know what I'm talking about because you had the same experience. So why are you curious about this thing?
yeah,
It's
it
gonna be
just,
like, don't act like you don't know that we
yeah.
can walk into a store and not be followed around.
And they know when I say, I'm curious, or I said on a Facebook thread yesterday, and I've got to go back there and see if the guy pushed back, but he
Yeah.
wanted all lives matter my post, and I said I invite you to explore. So that's my I'm
Thank you for that
curious
language.
David, I invite you to explore why you're upset at my post, because my post
Yeah.
was essentially because I'm seeing a lot of people on my in my algorithm going, I stand with Ukraine, I stand with Ukraine after the Oval Office debacle that happened the other day with Trump and Zelensky, and I just said, I'd invite you to think about why you're so quick to rush to I stand with Ukraine when Palestine, Sudan, Congo, Tigray, Haiti have been, being decimated for years and decades, some, and you haven't said a peep, and he wanted all lives matter. Well, this is what's happening right now. So this is what people are, it's like all of it's happening right now,
Right
and
now.
I'm
It's
not
all
saying that
happening
you
right now.
shouldn't
Yeah.
empathize with Ukraine. I'm saying, why are you so quick to empathize with Ukraine and not the others? That's the
Mhm.
that's the thing to unpack. So I haven't gone back to see if he responded to my I invite you
If
to
they respond.
explore.
Yeah. No. And that's real. And like we're like foundationally, what is it? Like, can we name it? Will people actually name? Well, because those folks look more like me, and
Hmm.
then we have a lot more desire, or we have a lot more connectedness with those things that are in group to us,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
we identify could impact us in the same way because it's representative to us, which is why representation matters so
Right.
intensely.
Well, I don't know if you saw, did you see the presser that I'm referring to with Trump and
I
Zelensky?
don't, I have no idea, no about them.
I mean,
Mm-mm.
if you get on YouTube, I'm sure you can find it. It was a shit show. And
Mm,
what's interesting is that, Zelensky is a Zionist. I mean,
hmm.
one of the first places he went for support when Russia invaded was Israel. And so
Okay, I did not know that. Yeah.
so people, well,
Mm,
I'm learning this too, so I don't
hmm.
mean to sound like the one with all the info, but what's interesting is that people are so quick to see him as this poor, bullied, human who was I grant you, Russia invaded Ukraine, and Trump is trying to change that narrative. He's actually accused Ukraine of of invading Russia. That Ukraine is the aggressor. I mean, that's the
Is
narrative
that
that
what
it's been.
is that
Yeah,
what he did?
yeah, yeah. But interestingly enough, in
So
this,
he was basically saying that there was manifest destiny of Ukrainian territory that actually belonged to Russia. Like I don't even understand
no,
how he could make
he's
that.
not going that deep, but he's basically saying that
Oh,
Zelensky holds the power, that if Zelensky wanted to find peace, that he just needs to come to the table. He's not exploring at all that it was Russia was the aggressor. He's talking about Zelensky being a dictator and how he has all the power. So in the Oval Office the other day, it was Trump and JD Vance and baby Marco and Zelensky, and JD was the one, he was told to come after Zelensky, so he did the bidding. And then Trump just started going after him and saying, well, you're not thankful enough, you're not grateful enough, you're disrespectful to our country, we've been doing everything we can to help you, and you are disrespectful. When you are thankful enough, then maybe we will decide to help you, but until, you're never going to get peace if you keep being so disrespectful. And JD was going after him and going after him and going after him, and it was just, and so the result of that is that all of the bleeding liberals are all going, oh, well, I stand with Ukraine because he was bullied by our commander in chief in the Oval Office. And I'm like, but everything that Trump was talking about how he wanted Zelensky to do, has been done to the Palestinians all of this time, and we've been funding it, and the disconnect is not there. So that's why I called the guy in. I was just like, I put the post out there. I knew somebody would poke at it, and he did, and we'll see. But
yeah.
that's how we continue these conversations. So anybody identifies as white out there, the thing that we can do above and beyond, trying to get our corporations and organizations to find a new way to do DEI without calling it that, is to continue to have these conversations and to continue to be the person that goes, I invite you to consider when you're having conversations,
Yes.
because we are the ones we have to change. Our indoctrination has to be unpacked by us, and we have to unpack our own indoctrination, and that's the only way that this is going to shift. So
Yeah.
I'm off
And
my.
all of us are unpacking indoctrination, right? Because, like, again, the default, to your point and to the point of interrogating whiteness, the default is that we exist in, you know, Western civilization, in
Colonized.
white male ideology and structures and systems that are comfortable and allow the power to really be held in white males. If you are participating in that, again, because I'm on a land that doesn't seem to be what the standard of the
I
criteria
love
is, and
that
it's
for you.
lovely.
I'm so happy for you. Yeah,
I
I mean,
love that for me
but
too.
also too, the white men, we are the
Mhm.
ones that hold the power over the white men. I mean, we can
Exactly. Okay, so
turn
talk about that, white lady.
all of that, all of that. I mean,
Yeah,
we are,
man.
that's why our white tears work. I'll go back to that point because
Hmm.
I think it's important. We
Hmm.
hold all of the power. If our men want
Hmm.
to be satisfied in the bed, we hold the power. If our men want to have the dinner on the table and their children raised, we have the power. If our men want to, how many times white men are at the top of the food chain, but only because we keep lifting them up there. We keep
That
sticking
part.
the pistol under
All
them.
of us keep,
To hold you up.
everyone keeps lifting them up to that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Everyone though keeps lifting them up to that. If we're looking at like
True.
our global humanity and who is being elected into
Yeah.
positions of power across the world, there is something about like white male tantrum that we're all just like, it's not even worth the energy to try to be dealing with it. It was like, well, in my understanding, right? Because I'm, not sure where everybody else is placing their value,
Well, I mean, that's
things
why
like that.
that's
But
why we spend so much
the
time teaching our women, our young girls, how to defend themselves from rape instead
mm,
of teaching our boys how not to.
mm,
It's like
hmm. Yeah,
all
yeah,
of
yeah, I hear that.
all of this is intertwined. All rape culture
Hmm.
and all of that is intertwined the with the narrative that white men have all of this incredible knowing and power and strength, and when all they do is war and pillage and rape and destroy, and we white women spend all of our time supporting them in that, and it's like, we got to stop. That's the first thing we got to stop. So join in interrogating whiteness. You can either talk about this book or talk about another book that's going to be real, but you won't find one that's going to be more real with you than this one. Or at least I haven't found one. And I've been looking. So, and just do the work, because as we unpack it, and if we are raising sons, holy shit, we've got to be
Hmm.
doing this work.
Absolutely.
Not only are we out there, I mean, raising daughters too, obviously, that is important too, because you're giving them messages that they will grow up to and continue to perpetuate the white
For
women.
support. Yeah, man.
But if you're, especially if you're raising white boys, my God, the work that needs to be done
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
unpacking and
Because the world is their oyster. And so,
constantly correcting the indoctrination that they get at every level, that they are superior simply because of their penis and the color of their skin, and
yeah. And then other people using those structures that might have come from like indigenous cultural practices that had more power balancing between the different sexes, because gender again is a social contract, but between the sexes, right? There are communities that exist where the autonomy of the female sex person
Mhm.
has different roles that are not the lesser of the male sex person.
Right.
And then we have to talk about it in this way because it's become so difficult to be able to just allow people to be in the way that they want to be identified in this point.
Right.
Again, because we're going back to what is comfortable under the structures of white hetero patriarchy.
Right.
And that's not the world that we exist in. That is such a small percentage of the demographic of humans. And it is so destructive to what we're seeing when Donald Trump can say that the the country that has been raided by a larger country has to show some gratitude and what did you say? Which
Oh,
was it? You said it's so
he
outside of
wasn't grateful enough. He wasn't.
grateful enough for the support, but
Mhm.
we have systems of allyship where we're supposed to be supporting what we understand as democracy, but maybe it's also because democracy in the way that we understand it from the people, for the people, by the people, is
Yeah.
not what is happening right now, right? We're moving into this
That's how we were
very,
taught. Getting back to that whole being taught lies,
yes,
that's how we were taught, but that is not how this country operates. It is an oligarchy.
never has.
Always has been.
Hmm
It's never been a democracy. But we were taught
hmm
that it was a democracy, and it functions as a pseudo democracy, but it's not.
Not
It's
at all.
and so yeah, the if you want to waste any kind of time, it's quite interesting to watch that press conference that happened in the Oval Office with Zelensky and Trump, because it was disgusting. It was a disgusting display of white male dominance
Hmm
and throwing up emotionally and all over the place. And Zelensky, he just sat there and he listened and he took it, and there wasn't much else he could do. I mean, they set him up for it. They set him up
hmm
for the spanking. Um,
hmm
to all my
There
web
are things
people,
that we can do. Yeah, man. I don't want us to like,
yeah, he could
I
have
don't
stood
want us
up
to.
in that moment. He could have stood up to him. He could have said
And then
something.
there is also something about allowing that to happen and for people to be able to see it for what it was,
Hmm
right? And not saying anything back. And just like, do you see what these people do? I don't even need to say anything because the world will see this and hopefully the world will be disturbed by
hmm
what it is that we're seeing because this is quintessentially white male heteropatriarchy telling me that I need to be grateful for them allowing me to exist. That's
Yeah,
bananas.
yeah.
And no one allows me to exist. Nobody has discovered me. Nobody is telling me how I'm going to die. It's just
Yeah,
not what's in my spirit, vibration, or energy in any way, shape, or form.
absolutely, my friend.
Why do I give a fuck? Why do
Thanks for
I
joining
give a
us.
fuck?
Until next time,
Why
as you
do I
move
try
throughout
so
your day,
hard? Why am I
continue to
so
ask yourself,
attached? Why do I give a
Why Do I
fuck?
Give a
Why
Fuck
do
is
I
produced
give
in
a fuck?
collaboration with Johanna and
Why
Diane.
do I try
Music
so
by
hard?
Norwegian
Why do
musician
I care so
Water.
much?
See you next time.
Why do